Hi everyone, my name is Eddie. I'm from the Hamiltonian U Poets Collective, and I'm here to share some poems with you. When people always ask what type of poet am I always like to say I'm a love poet. I think love exists in so many different forms, whether it's love for your community, love for your neighborhood, yourself, love for another person in a romantic or platonic sense. I also think a love poet is the greatest weapon of oppression in some of the dark times that we're living in. Or maybe I'm just melodramatic, and I'll let you guys decide. So I used to work at this church, and sometimes these kids ask me difficult questions about God and stuff. And then one day, this little boy CG asked me, Eddie, what are angels like? I pause and offer the best answer I could. I say, they have brown eyes, soft hair, and names like hers. He asked me, Eddie, are they beautiful? I say, CG, imagine what your favorite song would look like. She's music for my eyes, transforms my stomach into an orchestra of butterflies just by being in my presence. She is entire galaxies of beautiful. See, Mars is only red because he's blushing in front of her. She's the reason Saturn has been saving up its rings, and Pluto renounces planetary status, hoping to become a meteorite just to fly a little closer to her. Her smile is a luminous half crescent the moon is jealous of. I imagine that flowers sacrifice their petals as a form of worship. See, this ground isn't worthy. He says, Eddie, how do you know she's an angel? I say, just look at her. How can she not be? And there we sat, two kids at an art table, him fussing with his craft, refusing to believe that a creature so lovely exists in a world so cruel, and me, determined with all my might not to understate just how magnificent she really is. He attempts to stop me. He says, Eddie, if she's an angel, tell me where her wings are. I say they're located at the corners of her mouth. Every time she flaps her wings, smiles, I'm in heaven. I bet you her smiles at the end of every rainbow. She fits me like a long-lost jigsaw puzzle. I bet you. He interrupts me, Eddie. Aren't you afraid of cooties? I want to tell him that she's the very antidote for fear. I spent most of my life being a social chameleon, but she has this way of making me feel beautiful, whole, and silly all at once. But realizing that might be too much for a 7-year-old mind to comprehend, I simply say, kissing my boo makes my boo-boos go away. And besides, who has time for cooties when I've already caught the love bug? Dear CG, somewhere between the lines of boys and men, we stop believing in things like angels, Santa Claus, or the Tooth Fairy. But promise me, pinky promise me if you have to, you'll never stop believing in love. So, like I said, I can be melodramatic. So you'll have poems like that, but you'll also have poems like this. A list of metaphors I use to describe my failed relationship. Sand, the epitome of all things small and insignificant, has a way of slipping past your fingertips, and no matter how hard you try, always gets eroded by the ocean. The ocean, a perfect metaphor for tears, for waves of emotion, for I can relate to the tide, to be tossed and turned under the gravity of the moon. It's so easy to get caught up in the current and get lost in all that isn't love. Time. Now this doesn't have to be a metaphor. Talk about the time you had a picnic on her bedroom floor, or the time you both had the runs and she let you use the bathroom first, and you knew it was love. Or talk about the time, how even on a clock, hands are dying to come across each other several times a day. Their whole life revolves around it. I'm sorry. I've either broken the record of failed promises, or I'm a broken record of failed promises. My grammar's always been terrible. My communication's been worse. But in fear of being melodramatic, I'll actually talk about what breaks my heart the most. What breaks my heart the most is experiences for people who look like me. I think dark-skinned individuals um, are at the hands of a lot of racism, a lot of systemic oppression. Um, And as much as we try and articulate it, I don't think we can ever truly capture the way it feels. And our quest as poets who look like me is not only to bring awareness to these issues, but is to find solidarity. The darkest pity party. Me and my shadow exchange horror stories about being black. I say to my shadow, I envy you. No one ever questions the quantity of your blackness. You're never too black or not black enough. You were always just simply black, without question, without interrogation. I envy how your hands have never felt the chill of cuffs, never been presumed guilty until proven dead, because no matter how hard they try, they can never kill a shadow. And my shadow says to me, I know we both know what it's like to be a walking chalk outline, a shadow's place, either on the ground or against a wall, and in the dark, everything that makes me uniquely beautiful is robbed of me. The warmth of my personality and skin tone become the tone of nightmares. The skin, nothing more than the fingerprint of a violent night. They label me an angry black man, base my whole existence on throwing shade, and why wouldn't I be angry? I hate the way I stick out in white spaces. I try and comfort my shadow. I say, I envy how close you are to our roots. No one knows the history the way you do. The melanin in a shadow is a vow. Watch how easily two shadows become one flesh, and I have never known a love like this. I love the way you flip the script, appropriate their movements, and call it normal. My shadow says to me, call it conformity. Call it being puppeted. Call it being spoon-fed a culture without spice. Us dark-skinned individuals have never had the crown of normalcy, never been given the luxury of tears, even though it's clear I feel the weight of everything on top of me. And it's maddening, this code switching we do. In some lights, a shadow has to split itself in two to fit into a workplace. Present at every board meeting and cannot speak. Our glass ceilings the floor, to be stepped on and stepped over, give new meaning to overshadowed, and we bond over these memories and pre-written destinies, a connection so close it is almost physical, our kinship Siamese-like, a brotherhood so real we nod in verification upon meeting one another. For even boxers know, on some nights all you have is your shadow fighting with you, but cops know. The best way to make shadows scatter is swirling lights. And I think despite these adversities and despite these challenges, we still find ways to love. We find love in so many different things. I think it's such a beautiful thing. It's a human thing. It's a powerful thing. It's a strong thing. I think it's a thing that's captured within this next piece. So it turns out I'm really bad at gardening. The only plants I know are factories. The only petals I know go on bikes, which makes sense. I grew up idolizing the man of steel and was ruled by an iron fist. Give a man a shovel, and all he knows how to do is dig a grave. My mother tells me it takes a different type of love to garden. You must dig deep in what has been dead and buried and provide warmth until it becomes beautiful. She tells me it takes a different type of faith to garden. You must be on your knees, literally get down to earth. She tells me we come from a long line of gardeners. Why else do you think they call it a family tree? Why else do you think they say get in touch with your roots? And me, I'm a bad gardener. I neglect my buds. I leave at the first sign of commitment. What do I know of growth? What do I know of beauty? My mother, she stops me dead in my tracks and says, take a look around you. Look at all these people here. They happen to be planted here for a reason. Don't you know that today's seed waters tomorrow? Don't you know that everything that isn't love withers? Don't you know we conquered yesterday? We're from a city on a hill that cannot be hid. Don't you know that everything that isn't love withers? So the next time you see me performing a poem, smiling, or just simply breathing, No, I'm trying my best.